Hi, it's Leanne here from healthy.co.nz. For your video today, we thought we'd offer you something a little different. Rather than just having my point of view, we've had the privilege of interviewing Corinne Humphries, a medical research consultant. Now, I've known of Corinne for about 15 years now, and I've always thought of her as an absolute guru on the field of natural medicine. If she's speaking, I'm listening. Recently I learned that she's been consulting for natural health laboratories, and they have the supplement range Clinicians. Now, I've always been a really big fan of the Clinicians products, but when I found out that Corinne was consulting for them, this made me even more excited about this product range. So Corinne has a nickname given to her by her colleagues. They call her the Fecal Fairy, as what is happening in your digestive system is one of her main areas of expertise. So today I'm going to interview Corinne Humphries so we can learn all about probiotics. But before we do this video, here's a little bit more information on Corinne. Corinne's a registered naturopath who graduated from the South Pacific College of Natural Therapeutics. She has a diploma in medical herbalism and homeopathy, and from the Charles Sturt University, a bachelor degree in health science and complementary medicine. For a number of years, Corinne operated a multidisciplinary practice specialising in functional medicine. She's also served as a clinical consultant for a number of specialty diagnostic companies, which led her to immigrate to the US in 2001. During her role with the American company Genova Diagnostics, Corinne was instrumental in developing a comprehensive gastrointestinal profile, along with some other specialty gastrointestinal and metabolic profiles. She also served as an educational resource for physicians, consulting to thousands of practitioners in the US and overseas. Corinne has lectured extensively on numerous medical topics throughout the world and authored a chapter in the textbook of natural medicine on the topic of intestinal permeability. When she returned to New Zealand in 2006, she founded a research company which sees her developing natural evidence-based formulations for a number of health conditions. Corinne regularly travels abroad attending medical conferences to keep abreast of the latest research in the field of complementary and alternative medicine, and she has a special interest in probiotics. So what made you so interested in the field of probiotics, Corinne?
Well, my initial training was actually in the field of medical microbiology, and I've worked in private laboratories and also public hospitals in New Zealand and England, so I've got a fairly good understanding of bugs from a biochemical level. And then when I was in clinical practice, I specialised predominantly in gastrointestinal issues, and I would regularly send samples over to the US, a specialty lab over there, to actually look for both ordinary microbes that might be in the gut, but also beneficial bacteria as well, because New Zealand labs don't actually offer that service to date. And this gave me an opportunity to see what probiotics I gave my patients actually colonised the gut and which ones didn't. And I guess given my skill set, with a combination of microbiology and naturopathy, I was invited to be the medical education specialist for the gastroenterology division of Genova Diagnostics in the US. And this was a wonderful opportunity to develop novel specialty diagnostic tests for GI issues, and also it was a non-invasive way to assess gut function and microbes. And part of that role actually saw me attending quite a few microbiology conferences in the US. And now that I'm back in New Zealand, I still regularly go to both the US and Europe just about every year to continue to attend the probiotic conferences. It's just amazing the research that's coming out there, and it's such an honour to hear firsthand from these researchers what's actually happening in the field of probiotics. And it's that information combined with the scientific papers that I actually use to source probiotics throughout the world.
Wow, that's impressive. So what actually is a probiotic, Corinne?
Probiotic, as defined by the World Health Organization, are live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. So quite a long sentence, and they have modified that quite significantly over about the last 50 years. I think the key words for me is live and adequate. If we have a probiotic that doesn't have viable or live organisms at the time of use, it's not a probiotic. And similarly, if we don't have the right numbers or adequate amounts of a probiotic, it's not going to be effective either.
Mm-hmm. So do we need to take probiotics on a regular basis, or say just when we've got symptoms created by something like, say, taking antibiotics?
I think we should take them on a daily basis. This is probably because our diet's changed so much over the years. Historically, we had a diet that was rich in fermented foods, which did contain bacteria, because we didn't have refrigeration, so we needed a way to preserve our food. But these days, you're not going to get many people having sauerkraut or lactic fermented broths as part of their standard diet. We actually have about 10 times more bacteria in our colon than we actually do human cells.
Wow.
That make up the tissues of our entire body. It's huge. And for this reason, some of the researchers actually say, well, this colonic flora is really an organ in its own right, because it performs so many different metabolic roles. And it's also involved in immune regulation as well.
So can you give us some examples about what some specific probiotics do in our gut?
Sure. They make vitamins for us. Specifically, they make vitamin B2, they make folic acid, they make vitamin B12, they make biotin, which is also known as vitamin H, and they make vitamin K as well. And they also produce short-chain fatty acids. Now, these short-chain fatty acids provide about 5 to 10% of our total body energy requirements each day. Yeah, so as I mentioned as well, they also help build or support the immune system as well. They're involved in that. And they do this in two ways. They do it by priming the maturation and balancing of our immune system at birth, and then they go on to sort of stimulate and continue to prime our immune system throughout our adult life. Now what this means is that we have a healthy response to dietary allergens and environmental allergens, and it also means that we have tolerance to this gut flora that we have, so we can recognise friend from foe. And by continuing to stimulate or prime the immune system, it means our body's sort of always ready if there are any challenges that come in. For example, we might have pathogenic food that's actually in our diet as well. I think a lot of people aren't aware, but we have about 70% of our immune system is actually in our small intestine. It's known as GALT, or gut-associated lymphoid tissue.
Wow, I bet very few people actually realise that.
Yeah, so it is. That's why I think the researchers say it really is an organ in its own right.
Yeah, definitely. So Corinne, what are some of the misconceptions about probiotics?
I think from a consumer standpoint, there's really about 4 key misconceptions. One is that quantity is everything, in terms of the more numbers, that the more the merrier, the more probiotics we actually have in a formula, the more effective it's going to be. That we need to take probiotics away from food, and also that we need to refrigerate all probiotics. So let's start with the first misconception, that one of quantity. I think a lot of supplement companies have sort of misleadingly taught our consumers that more is better, and now there's this sort of tug of war where everyone's trying to put in a higher dose of colony forming units, because that's how we measure probiotic strains. This belief system that more is better is actually a fallacy. We have no idea unless we perform studies on that particular strain or the combination of strains together, and we then have a defined dose, and then we look at the outcome and see if we find that. What we do know from the research is that the beneficial effects of a probiotic are both dose specific and strain specific. So it's probably good at this point if I take a step back and define for your audience what a strain is, a probiotic strain. We're probably all familiar with the term lactobacillus. We know this to be a good or a beneficial bacteria. But there are actually quite a number of different lactobacillus strains. For example, there's Lactobacillus acidophilus, there's Lactobacillus rhamnosus, there's Lactobacillus bulgaricus, and so on. When we use the word lactobacillus, what we're doing is we're identifying the genus of the probiotic. If we were to say, for example, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, then we've identified the species. Rhamnosus is the species. And what we can go on to do is further define a particular probiotic by identifying the strain as well. Now this is done in laboratories. They normally use genetic typing and really sophisticated methodology like pulse field gel electrophoresis. But anyway, they end up giving us a particular strain number. So just like there are a number of lactobacilli, there are a number of Lactobacillus rhamnosus. So if we were to say Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, now we've identified the genus, the species, and the particular strain of that organism. And if I give you this analogy, probably a good idea is to talk about, make some models of cars with this. if someone said they had a Toyota car, then we would know, well, that would be the equivalent of the genus, if you will. It could be one of many cars they have. If they were to further define what type of car they have by saying, I've got a Toyota Hilux Surf, that would be the equivalent of saying the species of the car. Now, out on the road, as you know, there's still going to be a whole bunch of different Toyota Hilux Surfs. So we need to further identify that. And one way we're going to do it in a car standpoint, or that analogy, is to actually say, what is a particular model and what is the year of that car? So if we then say Toyota, which is the genus, if we say Hilux, which is the species, and then we go on to say SSRG 1995, we now know that would be the strain. We now know exactly what type of car this person has. And if we were to have a look at that manual for the car, or in the case of probiotics research papers, we would know exactly what type of characteristics that car has. For example, it's got ABS brakes, it's got a turbo engine, runs on diesel, etc. And just as models of cars are different, you know, and we have so many on the road, probiotic strains are also very different from one another. We can't, for example, say all Toyotas have four-wheel steering, because that's going to depend on the particular type of car we've got. Just as we can't also say all probiotics, for example, all lactobacillo are going to reduce the incidence of respiratory infections in humans, because that's going to be, again, specific on the particular strain that we're using. So a key thing when you're actually looking for a probiotic supplement is to make sure that on the label they've got three things. They've got the genus that we mentioned, they've got the species, and they've also got the strain identified there as well.
Wow, that is so interesting, Corinne.
Yeah.
What about this whole refrigeration part? You know, some probiotics say we've got to refrigerate them, and then other probiotics say that we don't need to refrigerate them.
Yeah, the refrigeration is good. I think I might take a step back and do the actual numbers game, because that's probably the next one that sort of segues in quite well from what we spoke about. Again, a lot of the probiotic companies have actually said, you know, more the merrier in terms of multiple strain formulas are better than single strain formulas, or formulas that actually contain two strains. And what they tend to do now is they throw a whole bunch of probiotics together, often, as we mentioned, in super high doses, and these are actually quite cheap to produce, because you don't actually have any studies required to fund them, right? You're just kind of throwing them all in together. What we don't know is how they're all going to perform together. They sound impressive, they've got the numbers, they've got 10 or so different strains, but do they really work? Now, to give you an example, some bacterial strains will increase our immune response in our body. Now, we would want this in the situation of having a cold or a flu. We want to be stimulating or priming our immune system. Other strains are actually going to tone down or dampen an exaggerated immune response. So this would be good, for example, with someone with rheumatoid arthritis. Now, if we throw all these strains in together into the one formula, we don't know what the overall outcome is going to be for the immune system. Are they going to compete with one another? Are they going to antagonise each other altogether? Are they going to negate the effects? We can only know this if we perform robust studies on that particular formula or combination formula. And I think for this reason, this is why I feel it's really important that it's better to have one or two well-proven probiotic strains in a formula where we've got the science to research and to support them, and obviously at an adequate dose, than to have a whole bunch of strains thrown in together where we may not have that much research to actually to support the strain either by itself or in combination with the other strains that are there.
Wow, that's really interesting.
So the refrigeration point, now that we're getting the idea of the strain is everything,
Yes.
I would say that there's three things really that really determine whether we need to refrigerate a probiotic. So one is, you guessed it, strain, what type of strain we're using. The other one is going to be what type of encapsulation technology we've used, or whether or not the manufacturers have used any, and also the type of packaging system we've got. So probably at this point it's, it might be worthwhile to actually take a step back again and say, let's have a look at the journey of the life of a probiotic. How does it get from here to our colon? And it's actually quite a mammoth journey. This is the equivalent of a triathlon back-to-back for them to get to the colon. They've got to first survive the stomach acids, and our stomach acid has a really, really low pH. It's normally about 1.4 if we are, producing a good amount. Once it gets through the stomach, if it survives the stomach acid, then the next kind of challenge it's got to contend with is a radical shift in the pH once it gets to the first part of the small intestine, which is known as the duodenum. So then suddenly the pH is going to bounce up from 1.4 to about 6.5. Now that shift can even affect the bugs, and also in the midst of all of that, you think when they're doing this triathlon, they've got bile acids to contend with. Now any of these three factors can actually kill the bacteria, so it doesn't even get to the colon where it's needed. And I think probably the best way to look at stomach acid is knowing that it's Mother Nature's antibiotic. This is what our own body produces to help protect us from harmful pathogenic bacteria that we might have in the foods that we're eating. One way to overcome these challenges is for manufacturers to use what they call bile acid and stomach acid resistant strains, and we can find out what strains are acid and bile resistant if we do tests in the lab. They've got machines that kind of simulate what a gut is like, or we can perform human studies and we can actually look for the recovery of those particular strains. That way we obviously know they've made this marathon journey to the colon. Another way we can get over that challenge is to actually have a special gel or matrix coating on the bacteria themselves, so that becomes part of the manufacturing process. Or we can have an entero-coated capsule. Now what happens with either of these processes, they allow the probiotic to bypass the stomach, so it gets through the first big hurdle, which is the stomach acid, and then it can actually reach the intestine intact. Now most companies should be able to tell you if these strains are acid and bile resistant. There should have been studies that actually demonstrated that, and of course they should be aware if they've used any special encapsulation technology there.
So why would somebody want to take a probiotic, and what kind of benefits would somebody obtain from taking a probiotic supplement?
I think you can take probiotics for a couple of reasons, and we've sort of discussed one of them. It's just to make sure that you do colonise good bacteria that you have it in, given we know that they perform so many different roles within our body. The other reason is you can take it for a specific type of condition. Now just because we take a probiotic doesn't mean we're actually going to harbour that probiotic in our intestine. It's not going to sort of start multiplying and have a life force of its own. It depends again on the strain, but sometimes once we stop taking a probiotic, it can be as little as 2 weeks or even a couple of days, and we have no indication of recovery. We've got no signs of recovery when we look at the samples. So it really is important that we actually take the probiotics if we want to have a good supply of our friendly bacteria, that we do take them on an ongoing basis. I personally take them maybe every alternate day rather than every single day, just as a way of life and for good health and well-being. Now the other time you can take a probiotic is for a specific condition, and a health professional may recommend a probiotic for a number of reasons. For example, they could recommend you take a probiotic if you've got digestive issues such as lactose intolerance, gas, constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. They can even suggest it to accompany Helicobacter pylori therapy. That's the bacteria that we can actually get harbouring in our stomach.
And of course, as women, a lot of us are aware that after we have antibiotics that we get thrush.
Yeah.
So often for women that's the main time that would be recommended an antibiotic, a probiotic.
Exactly. So we can take it for yeast issues, and there are again specific strains. There are some new ones on the market that perhaps we could talk about another time that are specific for female urogenital health. We could also take, as we mentioned, following antibiotic therapy is a really good time, or to actually upregulate our immune system. I actually think what we are going to see in the future, because this research is just coming out so fast, from all over the world, and it's, like I said, it's great when these researchers get together for forums. The last one I attended was actually in Amsterdam, and you had researchers from all over the world just collaborating information. And I think there was kind of a hint of what's going to be happening in the future, and that is we're going to be having condition-specific probiotics. So we're going to have a probiotic for high cholesterol, we're going to have a probiotic for diabetes, we're going to have a probiotic for respiratory illnesses as well.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? So what should people look for when they're choosing a probiotic?
Okay, big key things I think to look for is make sure that the strain's on the label, that there is evidence of the effectiveness of that particular probiotic strain, whether it's in combination with other strains or in isolation.
So how are we going to find that evidence? Is that something we ask the company for, or ask the person who's prescribing it to us?
A couple of ways. You can, the company should be able to produce that information available to you. They should have, if they've picked the strains, they should know that they actually have the criteria, the evidence to meet it. The other thing too is you at home, if you're email and computer savvy, you can go online to PubMed and you can type in the name of that organism. If you've got the species, the genus, the species and the strain, you can type that in PubMed and just click go, and you'll see for some of those particular strains there's either very little or no research whatsoever, and for others literally thousands of articles going to pop up before you.
Wow. It's a heck of a lot for us to have to remember, isn't it, Corinne, when we're out there trying to choose a probiotic?
Yeah.
Are there any probiotics out there that actually have taken all of these things into consideration?
Yeah, some other key things to actually have a look for as well would be that they cite colony forming units on the label. Okay, we don't want to have things in milligrams. These are live microorganisms, and that's how we identify them. So make sure they've got that. The manufacturers should also, and you should be able to get this information from them, they should be doing stability studies or assessing the amount of colony forming units at the time they culture the probiotic.